This is the winter of Australia's discontent.
From 6 p.m. today, all of Greater Sydney, the Blue Mountains, the Central Coast and Wollongong will go into a lockdown with stay-at-home orders in place.
Effective from midnight tonight, Perth and Peel will enter a full lockdown.
The risk is real and we need to act quickly, we need to go hard, we need to go fast.
State after territory after state, like dominoes, and 3 outbreak points, all of which are mistakes of state governments. First, New South Wales, that was a situation where a driver of an aircrew was unvaccinated, no legal requirement to be vaccinated or even masked. A week and a half later, a lockdown. Queensland then, someone from Bendigo travelling quarantined to the Northern Territory, quarantined, and next to an international traveller, goes to the Northern Territory, spreads the virus. Someone from Sydney goes to WA, spreads the virus, and that Northern Territory virus comes back to Queensland. And then today, Anastasia Palaszczuk reveals a casual receptionist at a hospital, required under law to be vaccinated, not vaccinated, seated next to the COVID ward, gets the virus, takes it to Townsville and Magnetic Island.
From 6 p.m. tonight until 6 p.m. on Friday, South East Queensland, Townsville City, Palm Island and Magnetic Island will go into lockdown. I am absolutely furious about this. We need to make sure that we are getting our population vaccinated right across the state.
She's furious, well, so are we. How are these mistakes still occurring? Joe Hockey sounds like he's not too happy about the vaccination program from the federal government. Have a look at this. Cameron Stewart, reporter from The Australian, presumably knows Joe Hockey from Washington days, he was the Washington correspondent, tweeted this image of Australia last of all OECD countries in terms of vaccination rates. 4.7% have had 2 doses. And Joe Hockey happens to be with Matthias Cormann in Paris. He's been posting pictures. Cormann now, former finance minister, the Secretary General of the OECD. So Hockey says it all. Looks like he wanted to send that as a private tweet message, perhaps to Stewart, instead posts it publicly and then is forced to delete it, effectively slagging his former colleague Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, who made the move last night finally to encourage young people to take AstraZeneca if they are prepared to take the risk, because that's what a hole the government is in terms of this vaccination program.
Does that mean that people under 40 will be able to talk to their GPs and get the jab immediately?
Well, if they wish to go and speak to their doctor and have access to the AstraZeneca vaccine, they can do so.
Any age group?
So the answer is yes, they can go and do that.
WA Premier Mark McGowan encouraged young people today to get vaccinated, but Anastasia Palaszczuk from Queensland said we should be following the ATAGI advice and only having AstraZeneca for over 60s, contradicting Scott Morrison.
The only decision that I recall being made is that the federal government was giving indemnity to the doctors, so people would have to go and speak to their doctors. But you know, we've had advice from ATAGI, and we should be following. I think we should be following that advice.
Well, we might have a problem with AstraZeneca in Australia, or our chief health officers do, but they don't have any problem in England. Have a look at this. This is a standing ovation at Wimbledon for Sarah Gilbert. Dame Sarah Gilbert invented the AstraZeneca vaccine, where a lot of the population has taken it.
We would like to thank all those who have contributed so much during this unprecedented period in all our lives. Today, they include leaders who have developed the anti-COVID vaccines,
So Scott Morrison making that move last night to ensure that more young people can access that vaccine. Let's see if it works. There's a view within government they will take heat on this issue for 6 to 8 weeks, but the supply is coming from Pfizer in much greater quantities and they can get through. However, there are concerns from people like the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian that the planning is not occurring once that supply gets through in order to roll the vaccine out. So we had this National Cabinet meeting last night. We had Daniel Andrews and Anastasia Palaszczuk at the meeting complaining about the numbers coming through hotel quarantine and the locations of hotel quarantine. We had Gladys Berejiklian at the meeting complaining about the planning and the supply in terms of vaccines. A divided National Cabinet now. Now let's have a look at Brendan Murphy, the Health Secretary, and Scott Morrison earlier in the year saying the vaccine program was not a race.
This is not a race. We have no burning platform in Australia.
It's not a race, it's not a competition, it's about the health and safety of Australians.
Well, I'd suggest we have a burning platform now. Now, Brendan Murphy, Health Secretary, did really well as Chief Medical Officer. How's he gone in terms of his advice on issues in recent times? Well, my understanding is he's been rolled on several issues because Scott Morrison and Greg Hunt have gone his way on several issues and it hasn't worked out for them. One of them is in terms of placing so much faith on AstraZeneca. Another is in terms of the regional quarantine issue and hotel quarantine generally. We've seen movements on both of those. Another is to insist that GPs do most of the vaccine rollout when pharmacists are keen as mustard to do so. So we know the Prime Minister's brought in this 3-star General JJ Fruin. That's almost a snub to Brendan Murphy, is my understanding, in terms of more needs to happen here. But ultimately, in the Westminster system, even if he takes the wrong advice, Scott Morrison is accountable. Well, Barnaby Joyce, he's just done an interview with Kieran, and we'll play that later in the program. He's not so pessimistic in terms of the vaccine program, or not blaming it for the situation we find ourselves in.
The vaccine is vitally important, but it is not the ultimate judge of outcome. The ultimate judge of outcome is people are alive who would otherwise have died. That's the ultimate. And that must be the case because we've not had one community transfer where it's resulted in a death, one community transfer that's resulted in a fatality. This year, we've had one person tragically came into the country and died. I think right now we've only got one person in intensive care. You know, people, sometimes you listen to others and you think that it was, you know, there were thousands dying a week. That is not the case, not one.
Richard Marles, the Deputy Labor Leader, he's also spoken to Kieran, and we'll play that later. And he talks about the failures in terms of quarantine and vaccination by the federal government.
What you see behind me here is an empty paddock, and if the government had been listening to its own advisors this time last year, what we would have now is a purpose-built facility operating right now. And in fact, what we've got is the bulk of people coming in through quarantine using hotel quarantine. We've had 25 breaches of that. That's almost one a fortnight. And right now, that combined with our low vaccination rate is why we are living in the land of the lockdown.
So much different information we're getting, so many different messages. Scott Morrison pointing to Britain and other countries like Israel saying, even if we're fully vaccinated, we'll still have potential outbreaks and problems. This is most concerning. If you listen to New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet, that's not the case, or even Gladys Berejiklian. 80% vaccination, they say, normal life.
Just last night, Wimbledon's back on. The Foo Fighters are playing at Madison Square Garden. I mean, that is the environment and the freedom that success looks like, and that's where we'll get to. And ultimately, though, when you have a vaccination rate that is so low, our ultimate responsibility as a state is to protect the vulnerable, and that's what we'll continue to do.
And here's yet another split in terms of the New South Wales economic package and federal economic package for the lockdown. We revealed details of the New South Wales economic package yesterday and how it was based on turnovers and compensating businesses, the federal government compensating workers from 8 days into a lockdown or from when an area has been declared a hotspot. Dominic Perrottet saying here that needs to occur from day one and more needs to occur out of the feds.
We believe that there should be support available to casual workers and individuals from day 1 to day 7, but more particularly right across the state. What you'll see with our package today is we are not discriminating on whether or not your business is located in a hotspot area or elsewhere across the state.